Just to prepare you, your body, when you have the surgery, is going to respond like you've been thrown through the front of a car windscreen. I got like hundreds of books and I was just reading. If you start learning about the mind, you learn about your own mind, and then you learn how to optimize your own mind. I was interested in evidence. I wanted to know that this stuff would actually work. There's a lot of truth to the law of attraction, but some people, they push it too much like it is an actual physical law of the universe. If you're constantly trying to think thoughts to manifest things externally, they would accuse you of being a slave to the external world. Happiness doesn't come from these things you get outside of you.
The behavior comes first, the feeling comes after.
Yes.
Are we going? Wow, here we are. How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Evidence-Based Excellence Podcast, yet again with your host and friendly neighborhood far-right thug, Mr. George Cresswell. And today, we have got a lovely guest right here. He sat across the table from me. He is the head honcho, producer, and lovely buttery smooth voice of the Stoic Handbook podcast and the Stoic Handbook series of courses, which you'll be able to find down below if you'd like to go and visit those courses and maybe sign up. Meditation and Stoic philosophy and more. It is Stoic philosopher extraordinaire, Mr. Jon Brooks. How are we doing today?
Very good. That was quite an introduction. I like the buttery voice part.
The buttery voice. But yes, so I guess we're just going to see sort of how this conversation goes. I got a couple of things which I wanted to sort of pick Jon's brains on today, particularly with regards to his Stoic pursuits and his extensive knowledge of Stoic philosophy. But I suppose we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of more things as well. BJJ, you mentioned some of your early experiences in BJJ. Maybe we can talk about the value of BJJ as well and see wherever the conversation takes us from then on. So I suppose we'll start off with, do you want to tell them maybe a little bit about sort of like what you do, where your interests are, particularly with regards to the stuff you do with Stoic philosophy and how that sort of played into the courses that you've created and all stuff like that?
Yeah. So maybe I can go back to the beginning so I can kind of paint a bigger picture with more context. So I think I was about 14 when I got a book called Tricks of the Mind by Darren Brown for Christmas. That was a really interesting book because even though it had magic in it, which I was interested in the most, it also had a chapter on skepticism, chapter on like how to live a good life, and right at the end,
magic, eh?
Yeah. So I was like, yeah. So I was definitely drawn to magic from a young age. Just this idea of, oh, you can learn this skill and through practice, sort of like jiu-jitsu, over time, you can do things that you couldn't do before, and then you can exhibit that to other people, and it's impressive. It looks good. So I was kind of introduced a little bit to self-improvement philosophy then, but kind of went off and did my own thing. And then I went to university because I was much into art. That was my main thing: painting, sculpting, drawing.
Okay, I didn't anticipate that.
Yeah, I did GCSE in art and A-level in art, and yeah, I did really well in art. And then I went into filmmaking because I always loved films, and I always saw filmmaking as this sort of synthesization of all the different art forms. So music, acting, directing, choreograph, performance, all of that kind of stuff. But while I was in university, I realized I wanted to do script writing. And I went to a script writing course and nobody in the class knew what we were doing. All right. There was a script writer there, like a master script writer teaching us, who was a practicing script writer too. And we were looking around like, I don't know, what is he talking about? The different acts and the inciting incident. And I had a cousin who told me that he had read a book by Robert McKee called Story, which is a 500-page book on how to tell stories. So I wasn't really a reader at this point, probably like 18 years old.
That's a fairly lengthy book.
Yeah, I just had this insight like, oh, if I read this 500-page book, I'll know much more than anyone else in the class about script writing. It was just like an obvious thing to do. So I got the book and I read it, and I did know more than anyone else in the class about script writing within like a week. And then people were coming to me, asking me to help write the scripts for their short films and so on. Over the course of university and my progression to script writing, I really realized that I needed to learn more about psychology to write good characters. And that's when I started buying psychology books, social psychology, different types of psychology books. And I realized that as I was reading, I got like hundreds of books, and I was just reading. And I started getting into self-improvement, because there's an overlap between psychology and self-improvement. If you start learning about the mind, you learn about your own mind, and then you learn how to optimize your own mind and about decision-making and willpower and all that kind of stuff. So through the course of this script writing journey at university, I started developing an interest in self-improvement, and I was just devouring books on the topic. But I was always, like you, George, a bit of a skeptic. So I was filtering through all of the self-improvement stuff through like a skeptical lens. Like I was interested in evidence. I wanted to know that this stuff would actually work.
Mm-hmm.
So I might see like a charismatic speaker like Tony Robbins, and I'd be like, yeah, but what is it? What's the thing that's making what he's doing work? Is it the principles that he's teaching, or the fact that he's insanely charismatic and that's making you invest in the ideas that he's teaching? Right.
Might call that, is it the thing that they're trying to push, or is it some sort of co-founding variable, a confounding variable that they're not taking into account, or they're not explaining? So yeah, I fully understand what you mean.
Yeah. And a lot of self-improvement is like that. If you can motivate someone to do something extraordinary, maybe the framework that they're giving you is almost like the magic penny that makes you invest, but it's not even the thing itself that makes you do the thing successfully. It's the fact that they motivated you to believe in it in the first place. So on my kind of search for improving my writing and learning about psychology and storytelling, I stumbled on a book called Consolations of Philosophy by Alain de Botton. He's a really good philosophy writer.
Okay.
He's written a lot of good. They're sort of like self-improvement philosophical books. And in that book, each chapter was on a different sort of psychological ailment, like suffering, setbacks, frustration, anger. And there was a chapter on frustration that featured Seneca, a Stoic philosopher. And it was a cool book.
One of the most famous.
Yeah, and it was a cool book. And Alain de Botton had a very simple explanation of why we get frustrated. He said frustration comes when we have a certain model of the world, and then reality clashes with that model. It's sort of like the meme, you know, expectation versus reality.
Instagram versus reality kind of thing.
So the example of road rage, if you feel angry about another driver on the road, it's because you've forgotten that there are bad drivers on the road in that moment. Like if you go out to drive and accept fully, there will be bad drivers that I'm going to meet, and I'll probably meet a couple today. When you do, you're like, oh, that's part of life. That's going to happen.
Then maybe you should have left 15 minutes earlier.
Yeah, because you have that knowledge. Or when you lose your keys, right? It's like, you do realize that in life you will lose your keys from time to time. You know, that's part of life. So instead of freaking out when that happens, you just go, yeah, I'm going to lose my keys from time to time. That's normal. So you kind of go with the flow of it. So I read that, I liked that, but I didn't zoom into Stoicism at that point. And then what happened then later on is around about the time of 1920, I went to the dentist and I had braces to correct an underbite. And the orthodontist said, this is going to take 2 years. It's a simple procedure. Just have braces 2 years. You have a quick operation at the end and you're good. So that turned into 5 years.
Oh, no.
Yeah. That turned
Talk
into
about
5
frustration.
years. Yeah. So like every month going into the orthodontist and having like a student like tightening up the braces and feeling the pain of that. And you just feel like you're on this ever-long waiting list in your 20s. So you can imagine the kind of the suffering and the angst that might have caused, you know, when your early 20s are meant to be the years that you go out, you have fun, you socialize. And I felt like I was on this waiting list to have my teeth back. And at the end of it, I had this amazing reward of a serious operation.
It's going to affect you trying to go out and pursue those things, because look in the mirror every single time. And if you're not happy with what you see, or you are frustrated by what you see, it's going to affect that social element, especially at around that pivotal turning point of like your late teens, early 20s. It's like you really are trying to find your feet at that point. And not having, you know, because you look around at all other people and you see, you know, you compare yourself to other people, and then you get your joy stolen from you by the comparison.
Yeah.
I can imagine having that operation at the end felt huge. I can imagine.
Yeah. So like what you said is right. So nobody when they're 12 years old thinks, I want my life plan to be like this. I want to, you know, do well in school, go to university. And then in my early 20s, I want to have braces. That's like what I want for multiple years. No one plans that. So it's a good opportunity to practice with that frustration and patience. And you learn about these different emotions. And in that time, I focused on reading. I just read a lot. I lifted weights. I just focused on myself and kind of made my world a bit small. Just made it all about like daily habits and so on. And then the time came to have the operation. So I went to see the surgeon, Mr. Smart was his name. There's actually...
I hope he was.
Yeah, there's actually some research showing that like your names can influence your profession.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, there's actually like more people have the surname Washington who live in Washington, and there's more people with the surname Cole or coal miners and so on.
Did they also lose? Oh no, that wasn't George Washington. No, I was going to say, did they also lose the colonies? Oh, well.
Yeah, that's those ideas from a book called Quirkology by Richard Wiseman. Who, Wiseman as well. He kind of backs that up. So I went to have a talk with the surgeon, Mr. Smart, Dr. Smart, and he said, just for you to know, this is at the end of 5 years, this surgery is completely optional. Don't have to have it. It's up to you. Just to prepare you, your body, when you have the surgery, is going to respond like you've been thrown through the front of a car windscreen. Just to let you know, it's that stressful for your body. I'm guessing he would have dealt with people who have actually experienced that as well, because you're going to have both of your jaws broken and then like put back into place, and then you're going to have titanium screws and all that kind of stuff put on there.
Oh shit, it's a bit like where they got to like redislocate your knee if you put it back in wrong to put it back in. Ooh.
And it's tricky because like if it's on your elbow or your arm, it doesn't feel as personal as your actual jaw and your face and everything.
Yeah, you talk and you breathe and you chew, you eat all the time.
Yeah.
Very noticeable.
So I'm thinking, I've committed to this. Yeah, let's do it. But there was a wait between the yes and the surgery. And I felt naturally fear, right? Nervous. So I was thinking, how am I going to actually cope with this fear? And I remember Stoicism. And I remember that I'd read books on Buddhism, and I knew they had practices. And a lot of these spiritual practices, like Buddhism, mindfulness meditation, and Stoic meditation, one way to think of them is that they're training for the worst day of your life. Like someone who's never meditated and then 3 family members die, they're going to be in a different state than someone who's had a spiritual practice for an hour a day for the last 20 years. You know?
Yeah, I can see what you mean, yeah.
It's almost like a preventative medicine. You're training your body and nervous system to be able to cope when things don't go well.
But like when they say an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure,
there you go.
Not being having to have a cure when your family members die, but you've done the preventative work, the preventative medicine for 20 minutes, half hour or an hour a day for like 20 years beforehand.
Yeah.
So you see what I mean when they say like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of Stoicism is about prevention as well. Cure is a bit different. Like you might use like an actual therapeutic model to cure something like severe depression or something like that. Yeah. So I remember looking at different Stoic practices, and one that I found that was really effective was something called premeditation of adversity. So in kind of popular self-improvement, I don't know if you've heard of this thing called The Secret.
Okay.
Have you heard of it? It's sort of like your thoughts manifest reality. Think positively, you attract. The law of attraction is also called.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard of it?
Yes, I have heard of that, yes. One of my mates to bang on about the law of attraction all the time.
Yeah, it can become kind of quite addictive.
It's not Zach. It's not Zach. I promise you, it's not Zach.
Okay.
I was looking at him because he knows what I'm talking about.
I was like, shall I moderate what I'm about to say?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
So the idea in the law of attraction, it has good ideas, right? You know, we know about self-fulfilling prophecies. If you're not looking for opportunity, and if you enter a fight and you don't believe you can win,
then you won't win, or you won't find the opportunity.
Yeah, you're not going to be looking for those opportunities. You're going to give up too soon. So there's a lot of truth to the law of attraction, but some people, they push it too much, like it is an actual physical law of the universe.
Law of thermodynamics.
Yeah, like you can win the lottery. It's all about your thoughts. And if you didn't win it, it's because you were thinking wrong. You were manifesting the right feelings. So it's your fault. And that's one of the big drawbacks of the law of attraction. When you're winning, it's good. But when you're losing, you blame yourself.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like what a Stoic would say also, it like from the brief reading that I've done. I've read Life of the Stoics by Ryan Holiday as well. But I think they would call that sort of like, you know, obsessing over things that you can't control either. Like, you know, you can't control the flow of the numbers. You can't control how the numbers come out, and you can't control the numbers necessarily that you had. Okay, maybe you can choose, but you can't necessarily have full control over those are the numbers are going to come out. So then you're sort of holding yourself accountable or holding yourself to blame for something which you had no control over anyway. Yeah. And that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. I mean, the Stoics would disagree with the idea as a starting point, because if you're constantly trying to think thoughts to manifest things externally, They would accuse you of being a slave to the external world. Happiness doesn't come from these things you get outside of you. So if all your life is dedicated to acquiring, you're missing the whole point of happiness. And
a lot of unhappy billionaires out there.
Yeah. So premeditation of adversity goes against the law of attraction. When you premeditate, you bring to mind worst case scenarios and you meditate on them and you mentally rehearse handling them wisely. So someone who's into the law of attraction would be like, get that away from me. I don't want to think negatively. I don't want to think about worst case scenarios. It's different from worrying though, right? When you worry, it's like the thoughts attack you. They kind of rush into your head intrusively and you didn't put them there. Contemplation of the worst case scenario is you're calm and you're thinking about it and you're thinking about it thoroughly and calmly and how you're going to deal with it. It's different from just worrying. And the way that I explain to people why this would be effective is if you're on an airplane with someone, would you like a pilot who's only interested in things going well and they haven't even looked at the things that could go wrong, right? You'd want to be with a pilot who knows everything that could go wrong with the plane and they have a response to it. At that, you're going to feel good then, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. Why wouldn't
be quizzing that pilot being like, what does that button do? You better tell me within like the next 30 seconds.
Right. Yeah. The same as like Elon Musk says when they're designing spaceships, they write a big list of all the things that could go wrong and they do everything to stop that from happening. That's premeditation, but in like a business sense. So to deal with the anxiety and the fear, rather than run from it, which will never work, I would go into it and actually try to make it worse, make it stronger. So the model of anxiety that I have is that if anxiety is a flame on a candle, right? A lot of people are trying to kind of move the flame away from them, but that never puts the flame out. You can, those magic candles that kind of like light back up. Someone who's got a lot of anxiety, that's what will happen. You blow it out. I feel relief until it comes back. And
it's like they're doing only things like the short-term relief pretty much, but they're never actually like getting to the root of the problem that's causing it to flare back up, basically. If
you're always trying to get rid of something or avoid something, it's going to go stronger.
Yeah, I think Jordan B. Peterson says something quite influential on that, which is he phrased it as anxiety-induced retreat makes the thing that you retreated from far more anxiety-inducing when you come to it the next time. So it's like, it's a classic example. If you didn't face up to a bully, well, the next time that they come around, you're going to be even more fearful because you already have that response of what happened before. You fled before, so now it's going to make that even much more harder to deal with it now because you already have that. You've already won down, so to speak. But I think he said that I think it was in 12 Rules for Life. I think he wrote that down. I was listening to it on audiobook once and it's just like, oh, that has blown my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. This ties into a theory that I really like called self-perception theory. And this theory states that you're always observing yourself in life. There's a part of you that's like outside of you watching how you behave. And then instead of feeling emotions and then behaving accordingly, instead what you do is you behave accordingly and then you get the emotions to match that. So it's essentially what you said. So if you want to do something brave, like ask a girl out, you can't wait for the courage. By asking the girl out, you gain more courage because your self-perception is going, oh, this guy's brave. He should have those feelings.
Yeah.
And the flip side of that is if you run from something, this guy's cowardly. He should have more anxiety. This thing's scary.
I think that's my big thing with competing in BJJ at the minute is I'm not just pushing myself to do it enough. And then it's exactly as you said, I'm not competing enough so that I'm not experiencing, the courage, so to speak, or the positive emotion or the feeling of being brave or strong or courageous, whatever it is, because in my mind, I'm not doing the thing. It's exactly as you said, the behavior comes first, the feeling comes after.
Yes. Yeah. And when people sit around asking for motivation, and I'm just like, that's not how it works,
You're saying, if you wait, inspiration will wait as well. I think that's another quote from James Clear.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So going back to the premeditation, waiting the surgery. So you're meant to think about the worst case scenario and go into the fear. So the model of the flame, the way that you get rid of the anxiety is not by trying to get rid of the flame, but by burning the wick. Because when there's no wick left, there's no flame.
There's no flame.
So it's called cognitive exposure. If you have a fear of dogs, you need to, petting a dog might be too much, but you can just bring to mind images of dogs. You can bring to mind cuddling dogs. You can look at pictures of them, videos of them, maybe be in the same room as them and gradually expose yourself more and more till it desensitizes. So when I first started doing public speaking, I would imagine everyone in the audience hating it, and ridiculing me. And realizing that if that did actually happen, that's actually fine. I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? I'm just be like, all right, sorry guys, I'm done. It's not like this terrible situation where I'm going to die, So like, okay, that didn't go well. But we build it into something more when we kind of don't allow ourselves to think about it. So I would rehearse the surgery and go into it, and I would even find I'd modify different Stoic practices and find real case studies of burn victims and so on. I've had like 50 surgeries and meditate as if I were them, living their life, and they still found meaning.
That can be a dark place to go into.
Yeah. But then you come out of it with like gratitude and relief and so on. So I was also meditating, mindfulness meditating, like I was building up to like an hour a day. And one of the really potent benefits of meditation is that time can become moment by moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember even being wheeled in to the surgery, I was just like, am I okay right now? Yeah. A little bit closer. Am I okay right now? Yeah. And sort of time can slow down into a moment by moment basis. And you'll find that pretty much throughout your entire life, you're almost always okay in the moment, with very rare exceptions. Even if you've had like a catastrophe happened, if I said to you, right this second, this moment, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
You're usually like, I'm okay. My life sucks, but right now I'm okay.
Yeah.
It's rare that we're actually like dying and like, I don't think you would have been able to answer the question when you had your
if you asked me that about 13, 14 months ago, maybe not.
Up until you lost consciousness, I'm sure you were okay.
Sort of.
Yeah.
On dying on the floor of the Grange Hospital, maybe not. It's like I wasn't okay for a little while, but yeah, your point's that.
Yeah.
That's what do you call it? Extenuating circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, of course, there's going to be certain situations. I mean, not everyone gets meningitis, right? But a lot of, what was the name of it again? It was...
if you want the fancy name, it was meningococcal septicemia. That was the fancy name. Septic meningitis.
Okay. That's why I asked you to say that, yeah.
Meningococcal septicemia. So yeah.
Yeah.
Best sleep I've ever had in my life, though.
Yeah. So I started experimenting with the different kind of practices there, and I had the surgery. And then after my surgery, I started a blog as I was recovering. And I started the blog on WordPress. It was like a little kind of WordPress blog. It looked terrible, but I was proud of it. I like was drawing my own like logo and stuff like that. And looking back, it's just like, that's a piece of junk. It was like
logo creation's hard, man. Logo creation's hard, especially for me. I'm not artistic in the slightest. So
yeah, I mean, being artistic can actually be a hindrance as well, though, because like not all logos need to be like flashy, and sometimes like the Nike logo is just like, you don't have to be an artistic genius to create a tick.
To draw a tick.
But there's a different kind of artistry to logo creation. So anyway, I created a blog, and the first article I wrote was on procrastination, because I'd read a book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. You familiar with that?
No, I haven't read it.
It's it's a really good book on procrastination and doing creative work. The basic gist of his book, if you're interested, is that good artists don't wait for inspiration. Amateurs wait for inspirations. Professionals just do the work. That's basically the gist of it.
I think it's probably a similar concept with like professional like musicians as well. I would imagine like some of them, they just say they sit at the piano for like a couple hours a day, and if they they practically type on the keys. Well, I say type, press the keys on the piano, and they're still doing the thing, even if nothing happens.
Yes, exactly.
And then that through history has been somehow the greatest pieces of music have been created. You know what I mean? Like Beethoven and whatever else.
Yeah. A lot of people want to be professionals at their craft, but they still act like amateurs because they're not acting as if they were being paid by the hour. So they're just sitting in a room like, yeah, I should be working right now. It's like, if you were being paid right now, you wouldn't be doing that. You would actually be trying to do something.
That's a nice quote. A lot of people want to be professionals, but they treat it, or they act like amateurs.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a nice little quote, that is.
Yeah, so because when you're trying to get your own creative project off the ground, you don't have a boss that's going to fire you. You don't have co-workers that are checking in on you. You don't have to like a certain schedule. You have to be your own boss.
Mm-hmm.
And some people, they just can't do it. They're like, I'm motivated when I go to work. You know, I do everything my boss asks of me. It's like, yeah, but there are consequences. Nobody cares if you don't work. Nobody cares if this podcast doesn't go out to anyone. Only you.
Exactly. No, exactly. I think that's one of the things I struggle with, where I've had bits in the past where I've let a podcast go in particular. So this is like my number one creative project, I suppose, at the minute. And I've had times in the past where it's been like months since I've last uploaded. And then you end up in that rut as well. You end up in that thing like, what do I talk about? What do I do? And it takes you ages to even get just one podcast out. Whereas now I've kept a lot more consistent with it. The ideas are flowing, the episodes are flowing, and I'm in a more of a flowing workflow, for want of a better word. You know what I mean? The workflow is a lot better as well. So, but yeah, you are right. It can be daunting in some ways, not having your boss over your shoulder. Because then, as I said, you have to be accountable to yourself. You have to keep yourself on track with, you know, whatever deadlines you set or however much time you spend each day on a certain project. You know, there's nobody looking over your shoulder and nobody cares if you fail. It's ultimately on your back. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, and I do think that framework of imagine if you were being paid by the hour and what would you be doing? And is that different from what you're actually doing? That's a really good way to look at it. Because I had another friend at the time I started my blog who was to try to start his blog. And I remember at one point he was like using an iPad to draw every featured image on his blog post. It was taking hours. I was thinking, no kind of CEO of a online media companies would be paying you for 3 hours to draw a featured image when you can pull one up in like 5 seconds on a royalty-free image search.
And with AI, Jesus Christ, you know?
So it's like you're just spending your time unwisely, you know? And you kind of know it when you apply that framework of how much, what would I be doing if I'd been paid for the hour? You kind of know I'm wasting my time right now.
I think when you're working on your own projects as well, it makes you realize how much value is on not only the product itself or the outcome itself, but how quickly you can get it out as well and how quick your turnover is. You know, because instantly as soon as one's done, you know, that one's done, you need to be on to the next thing and you need to be on to the next thing. And you know, I can't remember where I got it from, but it was like somebody was, you know, creates YouTube videos. I can't remember what it was, but they were saying, you know, I've seen no amount of people that have lost out on things because they work on things really well, but they work very slow, and the opportunities that they've had have been stolen by people who work faster. I think being in your own, like working on your own project or your own business, your own venture, it forces you into that mindset of you need to stay on track because you need to get this done ASAP as well, to a high standard. To a high standard. Yeah. That's really, really important.
Yeah. So I wrote my first article on procrastination, a little thing. And when you first start a blog, nobody cares. You don't get any visitors, no traffic, which is kind of nice because then if you create junk, nobody cares. Nobody sees it. But I kind of liked my procrastination article. So I emailed Stephen Pressfield, the author of the book, and I was like, hey, I wrote this article and I featured your book in it. And this is my first ever blog article. And I just left it there, forgot about it. And then a couple of days later, I was out shopping and I looked at my stats. It was like 200 views in the last hour. I was like, oh.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then I got a message from Stephen Pressfield. He's like, I shared it on my social media. And I was like, this is how it works, right?
That's
like,
awesome.
It's that easy. You can just message people that you've read books from.
Right? I never thought about that. It's like mad when you said, who was it you said, I think it was at the training the other day, was it you said you messaged somebody on like Instagram to ask about it? Was it Andy Galpin? Was it Andy Galpin?
I've had like it was text conversations with John Danaher, Brian Glick.
I was going to say, you told me you just messaged people and they respond. I'm like, you what?
Yeah, you can do it. It's
just like, it's something I would never ever think of because, you know, like, obviously you message him like you know, even if you read the instruction or watch the instruction, you're messaging a stranger at the end of the day. You don't necessarily know how they're going to respond. But I think with them guys in particular, especially if you're asking about like their jiu-jitsu teachings or their instructional or whatever, they'll be very, very open to that. But I remember you saying, what really shocked me one time was on your podcast, for example, you said, oh yeah, I had a conversation with Rampage Jackson the other day, and I was just like, you what? It's just like, a completely out of this world for me that wasn't, just to think. But it shows how connected we all are by the internet, by social media and all stuff like that. And I think that's something I've definitely taken forward or going to take forward.
There's this we put ourselves into boxes and we imagine there's a glass ceiling there, and we don't allow ourselves to think big. And it's like a big part of success is like, yeah, it's possible. Just that kind of relaxed confidence. Like, yeah, I could do that. Like, if you don't have that, yeah, you're always going to be telling yourself the opposite, which is like, this is not possible. And like it's multiple times there's been like a author or a person that I've followed that I've been really into, and then I've been on a podcast with them, a couple of weeks later, just because, nice. Why not, right? Just message them, tell them that you like what they do, you want to talk. It does help if you've got some kind of brand or existing platform behind you. It's harder without that, but still not impossible. So I started blogging and I started writing different articles and sharing them on Reddit. And I wrote one article on meditation. I wrote about 20 articles. They were all pretty good, blew up on Reddit. And I got a message from someone called Martijn from Amsterdam. And he was like, hey, I was wondering if we could republish this article on my website, highexistence.com. And I was like skeptical, like, who are you? Like,
shout out to Martijn from Amsterdam.
Yeah. So I was a bit skeptical, but then I started talking to him through email, and we developed a good email relationship. And this is where like integrity and being trustworthy comes in, because having like sneaky, weird ways of trying to be successful is not sustainable. So like, I value myself as being honest and trustworthy, and that came through to Martijn, right? If he thought that I was kind of a bit after something, it wouldn't,
a bit shifty,
the relationship wouldn't have worked, So eventually he said, I'm looking for an editor to come on to High Existence, $500 a month, but you'll get like this little bonus if you do this and this. So I was like, let's do it. So from this like kind of small, like not much going on in Wales, I was now able to say I'm a digital nomad now. I can just work from my laptop, not for that much.
But it's a start.
Yeah. So I think it was going up to like $800, $900 a month with these other bonuses. But it was like, I think I needed about $1,000, $1,500 to be like, I can probably travel now. So I worked with High Existence for maybe like a year. I developed really good relationships with Martijn, and there's other guys called Jordan. And we came up with a deal. Martijn was thinking about selling this site. High Existence was getting about 1 million visitors a month, had about 100,000 people in the email list. And he was like, I'm thinking about selling it unless we can improve the metrics of the site.
So these metrics are pretty consistent over a long period of time.
Yeah, the site was around for like 8 years at the time.
Okay.
So me and the other guy who joined with me, Jordan Bates, at the same time, he's American, but like similar age to me in background, even though he's American. We said, we'll help double these stats if we can become co-owners of the company. So that was the negotiation. And so we worked for about 6 months and hit the goal. And suddenly then we became co-owners of High Existence. So
it was all three of you then, was it?
Yeah, right. There was 3. There was at 4, like one was kind of left, but was still like an owner. So yeah, so it was like me, 2 Jordans and Martijn. So that was pretty cool to be like, oh my God, like I'm a co-owner of this company, and I kind of got there in this weird kind of way of working and being discovered. And then we said as a group, we need to create something special. Now we've got this blog, we've got this platform, but we have no store, we have nothing, no platform. We need to create something special. So we said, let's create sort of like a challenge course, and we called it 30 Challenges to Enlightenment. All right. It's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek name, but the idea is there's 30-day challenges, each with a kind of a different quest. And like the first one is called High on Existence, where you just abstain from any kind of psychoactive compounds. You'd struggle with that because you wouldn't be able to drink Monsters. Damn it.
But I don't even need to drink this because there's psychoactive substances in this. God damn it. But so just to be clear, just on that note, was that 30-day challenge? And then there's 30 of them?
30 of them, yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. So it's not like one challenge every day for 30 days. It's 30 days 30 challenges. Got you.
Yeah. So there was, I think, 5 or 6 like quests that focused on a different kind of theme.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one was more like biological challenges to do with like exercise and abstinence and things like that. So we're working on this. We created like a challenge map, got a designer in, made a trailer. It was cool. It was a cool project to do. And obviously I did filmmaking university, so it was nice to be able to work on scripts and work with an animator. And yeah, it was really fun that me, Jordan, and Martijn worked on that.
I mean, these like audio and video sort of things, was it?
It was pretty simple. We made a poster, which you could kind of mark off your progress.
Oh, okay.
That was a challenge map. We created a community and we wrote a 280-page book. So
nice.
To go with it. That kind of explained how everything worked and stuff like that.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was cool. And around about this time, I decided I want to go traveling. This is the time now. We hadn't launched this product. We were still working on it.
That's staying in. Just saying. That's staying in.
Sorry. I want to get a timestamp for that.
Cut. I could be forgotten where we are now.
It's okay.
So you said you were going traveling.
Yeah. So I decided I wanted to go traveling. So I went to Thailand for 6 weeks. And then after that, we all met in Amsterdam to work on this product. By the way, I'm tying this back into like my interest in Stoicism. Yeah. Interject, change.
Yeah. No, that's the problem. Yeah. I'm liking the story. So.
Okay, cool.
I'm assuming it's what happens in Thailand stays in Thailand.
Yeah, we won't go to Thailand. Yeah, but what was really cool is going to Thailand on my own, because if you went with a friend, you could kind of rely on the friend. But now when you go on your own, I'm a big fan of just going and doing stuff on your own, because you're like forced to then kind of make something.
Be
self-sufficient, yeah. And then I spent 6 months in Amsterdam then working on this challenge, 30 Challenges to Enlightenment. We launched it and we were like kind of getting by as a company. And then like we put up a pop-up on the website to collect people that would be interested in it. And we went home, came back to the office the next day after we launched the pop-up to collect email addresses. And it was like, how many people have joined? And they're like 500 people on the first day are interested. So this started to like really ramp up then before the launch.
But that was quite an exciting time.
It was an exciting time, yeah, because it was like, this is weird. This is crazy, you know? We're actually creating something that we think is valuable. Not some kind of like weird crypto product. But,
yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is you said it was valuable.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, especially when I've seen like your courses and when I've listened to your podcast, for example, everything, it's a product, but it's not about it necessarily being a product because you want to generate money. Yes, you do, but you want them to get a lot of value out of it. And I think that's what separates quite a few things and why some things are vastly more successful than others.
Yeah. Yeah, I've met quite a few like wealthy people who got wealth from like weird like exporting and importing bulk items in China and Facebook ads and crypto things. And they are like, I'm not happy, even though they got like money in the bank. And they like, can we come work and contribute to high existence, because they lack that meaning. So it is really important to have that kind of right work kind of principle. So we launched that. And that was crazy. That got like, I think like 70K in the first week that it was like launched, which was really weird. It was like, what the hell? How is this even possible? You know, just
culture
like,
shock, proper culture shock.
It was like, this is, and when it comes to transformation and personal development, you want to give yourself proof, not promises. So you need evidence. I know you're a big fan of evidence. You can't like think your way sometimes to certain mental states. You need to have the evidence.
Right. John Danaher said about sports psychology in that way. But I say you can't think yourself to an ADCC gold medal or something like that. So remember, I think it was when he was recording one of his BJJ Fanatics instructionals, they sort of had a bit of a laugh about it. Because he said, basically, I think the entire thing is horse shit, basically. Yeah. The whole sports psychology thing is like, you're not going to think yourself out of a triangle choke. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was quite funny. But yeah, Alex Hormozy, I think, is quite similar. He drilled that point a lot home as well. It's like, you know, the undeniable stack of proof that you have from what you've built is in a way your evidence as well for what you've done and what you can do. And that is the undeniable stack of proof that you need. Like Gordon Ryan's is his gold medals, ADCC, all manner of gold medals everywhere and belts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it's like you change by getting new reference experiences, which kind of gives you new beliefs about yourself and about the world. So it's like an evidence-based approach. So when you've gone through the process of creating and launching a product, and then that is done better than you've expected it to do, you have a kind of a psychological upgrade that before that you wouldn't have been able to have because you didn't have the evidence behind it. And people talk about this, like the 4-minute mile is a good one. You know, like nobody thought that was possible.
And then one person
did it.
Roger Bannister.
Yeah, and suddenly it's like, oh, that's actually possible now.
And funnily enough, then you see a lot more people doing 4-minute miles.
Yeah, so you sometimes just need that evidence to be able to go to the next level.
Same would be true. First person that got to top of Everest, you know, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay.
Yeah. So I love jiu-jitsu for that reason as well, because you change through evidence. Like there's a period in time I remember when I was doing jiu-jitsu and I would like pass a blue belt guard and it would be like, oh my God, that was so cool. Oh my God. And then maybe like swept a blue belt for the first time and I was like, amazing. But that changes you then. You're like, oh, I can actually do that now. That's possible. And then you do something else, and then you tap out your first, purple belt or whatever. And it's like, what? How is that? How am I even doing that? And that just changes who you think you are then in that context. So it's like an evidence-based way of self-development transformation. You can't think your way to having 500 hours on the mat.
Exactly.
It's like a certain...
You don't randomized control trial your way there.
Right.
Maybe you apply the scientific process to improve your training practice for the next time round, but yeah, there's no meta-analysis to teach you how to do a triangle choke to tap on a black belt or whatever.
Yeah.
So
we launched this product with High Existence. I was working with High Existence. We were doing lots of cool things, and this is kind of like a side story, but it's kind of related. We had a message from a company called Rhythmia. And Rhythmia are an ayahuasca retreat center in Costa Rica, but it's like a luxury one.
Oh, nice.
So like Deontay Wilder's been there, like a lot of celebrities have been there. It's like $5,000 or $6,000 to go for like 5 days.
Is that each, is it?
Each.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I wasn't going to pay because, it wasn't like something I really wanted to do out of the blue. But Rhythmia said, you can come to this retreat as long as you do like a podcast and write some articles, and it's a media trade.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that was like, another cool thing about working online and creating a blog and things.
There's no such thing as distance.
No such thing as distance, but also it's not about money. Like the opportunities and the relationships you can form. I've had good friends that became good friends because they found me an article I wrote on Google and they lived in the next city and they just emailed me and we just met up. It's like, right? It's like
happy days.
But you got to put yourself out there
Yes.
to just get a surface area thing. If you're like just locked in your room, you're not going to have
these
kind of interactions with people. So me, Martijn, and Jordan went to Rhythmia, and we got there, and it's beautiful. Like the nicest food cooked by chefs, pools, tanning rooms, gyms, stunning, right?
The high life.
Yeah, I think at the time the producer for Eminem was there, because my friend Jordan was into rapping and he was chatting to him about that. But it was a bit unusual when you got there because when you came in, there was a doctor there taking your heart rate and blood pressure and stuff. So it's like, well, this is a bit weird. It seems like a luxury resort, but why am I being medically tested? Right?
Why am I needing a medical test? A medical examination?
So we went...
Did you think then, like, what have I gotten myself in for? Was that your first indication?
It was interesting, yeah. I was like, okay, let's see. So we went...
No prostate exam, I hope.
No,
that's
no.
That's all right, then.
So we went to like the induction, and there was like a really funny, charismatic leader called Jerry. And he said, like, you're going to be drinking ayahuasca 4 nights. And he says, like, these are the 3 kind of mantras I want you to keep in mind as you go through these 4 nights. So number 1 is, show me what I've become. So that's the first question you need to answer. The next one was reconnect with myself, something like that. And like make my heart whole, these things. But the one that I kind of was a bit off with is like, show me what I've become. I was like, that's a bit of a, like, that's the starting point.
That's the starting point? That's the jump off point.
Yeah. So the daytime was beautiful in this place. You're having like really nice food, chilling in the pool. And then the night time comes and then you're all going into like the Mallorca and there's shamans there and different smells and mattresses and things get a bit more intense than in the night.
You start thinking, oh no, what have I got myself in for?
Something's going on, gonna happen, yeah. So yeah, we went through that experience. If you have any questions, I can go into that. But went through that experience, and I remember at the end of it having this kind of belief that I needed to learn more about Stoicism. So I got my hands on the Enchiridion by Epictetus, which is like the handbook. It's like 54 chapters, I believe, each about a paragraph long. So it's not very big. You could read it in an hour.
Okay, each about a paragraph long.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
But it's one of the greatest philosophy books ever written because it's like so direct.
One thing I do is, was it you that told me that said if you don't go to Costa Rica, you haven't done ayahuasca properly? I think it was. You said you had people that have said, oh yeah, I've done ayahuasca like wherever, but like unless you've gone on one of these retreats, you haven't done ayahuasca properly. I think it was you that told me that after training once.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like if you just filled up this bottle with ayahuasca and just drank it, you're just missing the kind of setting of it.
Yeah,
the background, the culture, the tradition of it. So you don't have to go to Costa Rica, but you just want to be with someone who's an experienced shaman that can kind of guide you through that.
I think it's more of like a joke. Like, yeah, people say they've done ayahuasca, but they haven't done ayahuasca properly. So it's just like, I was like, that was quite interesting.
Similar to like MDMA, ecstasy. Like there are people that have taken that while clubbing and they just have an amazing time. They're dancing and they're just loving life. Yet the same drug is being used to treat really resistance PTSD in veterans, right? But they're not clubbing and dancing. So like the setting,
they're suffering. They're like suffering.
But the experience is radically different too.
Yeah.
So just because the drug is the same, the drug is more like a kind of a door, and then the kind of MDMA assisted psychotherapy as a way to treat PTSD is very different from popping a pill and going clubbing.
Yeah.
It's just, you just can't compare them. So people might say like, oh yeah, I've done that MDMA therapy thing. It's like, no, you haven't.
Yeah. I understand what you mean.
Right. You
I
just
understand what
popped
you
a pill and Ibiza and right.
Yeah.
That was it.
But you were saying about the Enchiridion and
yeah. So I was not an expert on Stoicism, but the way that I've always approached creating content is I'm going to create to learn. So back in the day, one of the articles I wrote in my first blog was, what is metabolism? And at the time I didn't know anything about how metabolism really worked. Because, people would talk about it, like this speeds up your metabolism.
Metabolism's often a buzzword, yes.
A buzzword, yeah. So I was like, I'm going to actually research this and create an article breaking it down. The Krebs cycle and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote it, put it on Reddit, and then there was like a PhD in like protein metabolism or something, and it's like, he said this is the best introduction to metabolism I've read. Just because in order to...
Was it somebody responded
to it, whereas like a few weeks before I didn't know any of that stuff in the article. Mm-hmm. So it was a way for me to learn by creating. Like if I can't teach it, I don't understand it.
But like being able to explain it to a 5-year-old almost is when you really know it.
Same for jiu-jitsu as well. It's like the more you can teach the moves to others, the more you're going to be able to understand those.
And it reinforces your own learning as well, which is amazing. Like, and one of the best things that you can do to help reinforce your own learning is to try and teach it, because then you see the mistakes that you make when you're teaching it, and then that reinforces your learning as well.
Yeah. You see the holes in your technique when you try teaching them straight away. So like if you take Shaky, Richard Shaw, when he's like demonstrating a move and you happen to be the unlucky like victim of the demonstration, it just
victim is right.
It feels tighter than anyone else in the room, right? It's just different. It's like something is like worse about it.
Yeah.
And it's just like that step by step detailed drill. It could have been done like, a factor of like 50 times more than anyone else in the room, right?
And he's just so good at immobilization as well. I found like just being heavy, like Shaky's just so good at getting you into a position where you're really compromised and just being heavy and just keeping you there until you want to die. Like you almost want him to put the choke on you so that you can so that you can tap. Like, I remember no amount of times he's got me in north-south chokes in particular.
Me
And
too.
it's just been like, he's just kept me in like a north-south position with my arm trapped for like 2 minutes in the round and just gradually adding pressure. My arm's gone dead, like,
Yeah.
a minute ago. And there's nothing I can do. I'm like, you might as well just end it now, Shake. You might as well just end it.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that because I've been in the bottom of Shakey's north-south a bit recently. And I was thinking, what is it that makes it so good? And
just a note for you guys as well. Being in the bottom of north-south is not fun.
yeah, it's sort of like a top and tail position if you're on the bottom.
Yeah, it's not fun to be on the bottom of.
And the way that I was thinking about why is Shaky so good is because he presents you with 3 doors, A, B, and C.
And none of them are good.
Well, they're the ways out, right? So they are good, except first of all, he blocks door A, right, by a certain kind of turning of your head, or like that's
like a hand position or something.
Yeah. So now it's like you get to choose between B and C, and then he's going to look to see which one you choose. And before you've chosen it, he knows before you, and he closes that door. And now
slams it in your face.
Now, of course, he knows which one you're going to go for last, right? Right. And so that's what it's like. It's cutting off the exits.
Yeah.
So it's not like jiu-jitsu at a high level. It's not like these fancy inversions. It's your opponent can just literally read your mind.
Yeah. Because
they know what's possible and what's not.
It's a bit like when they say it's like physical chess almost when you get to a certain point, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So I started, I read the Enchiridion before. It's a really small book, but there's a difference between learning and sort of like reading something. Learning, like you can read the Enchiridion in like 60 minutes, but are you actually is it going to change your life?
Yeah, I was going to say, are you actually going to learn the principles or keep them in your mind?
Yeah. I can give you like a book, Jiu-Jitsu University, to skim read it. Not going to make a difference to how you perform on the mat. Right?
I think that's why as well, like sometimes you go back and read a book for the second time and it's completely different to how you read it the first time. Like it's a book I'm reading at the moment. I'm actually narrating it on the podcast. It's 1984 by George Orwell. And I'm realizing now, reading it as part of the audiobook series that I'm creating for one of the series on the podcast, I'm reading back through it and it's like completely different reading to when I read it the first time. I'm noticing more things, I'm learning more things, and I'm like, oh, I didn't remember any of this before.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. When you go back and reread it, it can be so much different. And then that can be a hallmark of when you're actually starting to learn more about it then.
100%. Yeah, so the phrase I like is X-ray reading. So it's sort of like there's reading and then there's like reading deeper into it. So what I started doing is I started taking each short chapter of the Enchiridion and then drawing diagrams for it in my journal.
Okay.
And just trying to like think about it visually and think of the frameworks and think of like how it connects together. And I just started doing that on my own. And then around about this time in High Existence, the guy said like, we should create a course on Stoicism. And I was thinking, I'm still learning about this. Like, this is something that I'm practicing. Because Stoicism is a practice, ultimately. Like, you can find someone like with martial arts who's like a historian of martial arts that can't actually do anything. You can find many experts on Stoicism that don't practice it. It's very common. Like, I've done my PhD in Stoic philosophy. Do you actually do any practices from it? No, I don't. It's like, okay, I'm interested in the practical side of it. So I just learn about it and run with it and then keep tinkering. So we said like, we're going to create a live 8-week course on Stoicism, and it's going to be really interactive. And at this point as well, I hadn't even taught in live settings much. So this was a bit of this was an opportunity to almost practice like Stoicism by presenting and teaching Stoicism and then refining my understanding. And so I started really learning as much as I could about Stoicism to be able to teach this 8-week course then, like week by week. And that's then when I started to really establish myself as more of like a student of Stoicism and teaching it, and really enjoyed it. I kind of synthesized Stoicism with other practices and ideas. I'm not like dogmatic when it comes to Stoic philosophy. I'm not like, you have to completely live the Stoic way through and through. If you just take one exercise from Stoicism and you find that it helps you, I'm cool with that. Whereas more purists would be like, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You know? So
that's when it starts turning into more of like a almost like a pseudo-religious phenomenon then, isn't it? Like you have like proper fundamentalists where like unless you take everything completely either literally or unless you do every single thing within a particular doctrine or set of ideas that are, you're not not a believer, or as you said, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. When it seems to me that Stoicism quite often is almost in some ways like a study of the self in a way sometimes with I don't know, maybe you can sort of correct me on that, but like with a lot of the principles, it seemed to be a lot of like mastering your own mind, especially when you're looking at things like adversity.
Yeah, it's interesting. So,
please do correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
my understanding of Stoicism is admittedly quite shallow.
That's why a lot of the modern books focus on that, because that stuff's relatable to modern people. It's like, how can I become more resilient? There's like, teach me. I want to read the book on resilience and be tough. And the real Stoicism is both way more transformational and powerful, but also less appealing as well. So real Stoicism is ultimately about developing virtue or excellence of character, which a lot of people are like, really? You mean I have to like moderate myself and like do the right thing even though I'm afraid to do it? And I have to be fair and kind? Like, can't I just be tough and a dick? Like, can I just do, like, I'd much rather just be tough and a dick to people. You know what I mean? And learn the Stoic technique just to be like not affected by insults or something. So the 4 virtues in Stoicism. So if you just practice these and didn't do any techniques and you just try to cultivate these, you would be more of a Stoic than a lot of people practicing the techniques but ignoring the virtues. So the first one is courage. So that means doing the right thing even though you're afraid to do it. So like, if you think of it like you're in work and someone's being mistreated and you know it's right to say something but you're afraid to say it, that's courage, right? That's like, I know what's right in my heart, but I'm too afraid to do it. That's cowardice. So you're kind of going against Stoicism.
Yes.
Right. Justice, which is better translated as fair kindness. So it's sort of, it's kind, but not like foolish kindness, where you're just sort of overly compassionate for no reason. Like
suicidal empathy, as some may say.
Yeah. The Buddhists call it idiot compassion as well. So it's like,
I like that one.
You've got to be equally compassionate to yourself as you are to other people. Like have boundaries, and
I understand that compassion can go too far.
Yeah. And so an example of like fair kindness is someone acts in a certain way that triggers you. You could say, well, have I ever acted like that before? I'm criticizing this person and I'm outraged at their behavior, but honestly, I'm pretty sure I was doing the same thing 6 months ago in different contexts, right? So you're being a complete hypocrite there, right? It's like, so yeah, for sure, set a boundary, but don't just ignore the fact that you see yourself in that person too. Practical wisdom, which just basically means like knowing about who you are, what's a bit too much for you. Like if you know that you're sensitive to drinking alcohol and you want to keep drinking, practical wisdom would be like, I probably shouldn't drink.
Just seems like the common sense response, almost.
Knowing what's too much and what's too little. And
knowing what to avoid as well, potentially.
Yeah, knowing what to avoid.
Different people obviously have different triggers or different things that they struggle with. So obviously the practical wisdom for one thing is going to be slightly different, maybe in terms of the cue that causes it to what someone else is doing, but the overall principle is the same. Yeah,
so like just generally ethical behavior. The best way to practice practical wisdom and cultivate it is a simple sort of review of the day. So at the end of the day, like what went wrong? How could you improve? It's just like develop that capacity to just act in ways that are more aligned with how you know you should act.
And I think there's a nice quote from, I think it was Seneca that said this was like, whoever puts the finishing touches on their day is never short of time. I think it's a nice.
That's beautiful.
It's a nice. I think I think it was Seneca. It was one of the big three. Because I think a lot of people, when they're looking into Stoic philosophy, particularly for the first time and like with a quite shallow sort of understanding of it, that like I have, they tend to have the 3 main ones tend to be Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius. I think those like sort of like the big 3 when you're looking at Stoic philosophy. But I think it was Seneca. I think it was Seneca that said that if you put the finishing touches on your day, so like you're saying, that little bit of self-reflection, that review, looking at what could be done better tomorrow, well, you're never You're never short of time.
Those are the big three, though, because like we have much more written by them than anyone else.
Okay.
It's estimated that about 95% of Stoic texts have been lost in like fires and things like that. So, yeah.
Because rightly saying, obviously, these guys were either like just before, in BC, so about 2,000 years ago, like all the way up until I think it was about a couple hundred AD, was it? Because Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor, wasn't he? So I can't remember the exact time frame when he was alive, but obviously there's been 2,000 years of history, 2,000 years of aging from their time to ours. So it's kind of a miracle that we have as many texts that we have, to be honest, with how many earthquakes, fires, wars, all the rest of it. It's quite lucky that we have the texts that we do.
Yeah. Well, those philosophers were all quite like well-respected people in their society. Obviously, Emperor of Rome, you're going to preserve his books. Seneca was like an ancient
advisor to Nero as well.
Yeah, advisor to Emperor Nero, like an ancient billionaire, essentially, statesperson, playwright. And then Epictetus was like, he taught the wealthy, like the wealthy students would come to him, and he was like a renowned teacher people traveled in to come to. So
was he originally from, like, obviously it was a lot different world back then that we live in now. Was he from a slave background?
Yeah.
Epictetus was? Yeah, I thought he was.
Yeah, the name Epictetus means acquired. So yeah, that's he was
there you go.
And it's said to have been a cripple as well. His master broke his leg. That's the story.
Yeah, I think, I can't remember where I read it, but it was kind of like the thing, like one of the guards, it was in like down in the, like some sort of mine, I think it was. And that's where obviously where they tend to have them working, like either in mines or some form of really hard labor, obviously. I think the guy was like, he was like, stick his leg in place, and the guy was like twisting his leg. It was like some sort of guard, overseeing all the slaves in the mine. And I think I mentioned this to you before. It was like Epictetus has apparently been quoted to have said, like, just sitting there watching it happen and be like, if you keep turning it, it will break. Just saying it just like that. And the guy just kept going and a leg broke. He's like, well, I told you it would break. And apparently that's one of the stories I've heard.
Yeah.
Obviously not saying it's definitive, but that's apparently how he got his scaggy leg.
Yeah. Lots of different stories like that, but yeah. So the founder of Stoicism is Zeno, and Stoicism was originally called Zenoism. So Zeno was a wealthy kind of merchant who, I think he had like dyes and things like that on his ship when he became shipwrecked. And then he went into Athens and found a philosophy book that featured Socrates. And then he was like, oh my God, I want to dedicate my life to this. So he spent the next 20 or so years studying Socrates and different philosophers. And then he synthesized them into his own form of philosophy called Stoicism.
It's kind of thing, they call it the Socratic method today, don't they? Where like, you like what we would normally call sort of like debate or conversation goes all the way back to the method that Socrates himself sort of came up with. So kind of interesting when you see how these principles, but how we sort of have like more like sophisticated talks and debates, like really constructive talks and debates today, go all the way back to what they were doing 2,000 years ago. Absolutely insane.
Socrates is like a Stoic role model. He's respected a lot by the Stoics and mentioned a lot throughout like Epictetus's work, Marcus Aurelius's work. But do you know much about like Socrates and the Socratic method? And
no, a little bit more about the method, not so much about the man himself. No, not so much about the man himself. I haven't really gone into that area of history too much yet.
Yeah, just the idea of Socrates is very interesting and useful, especially today. He was proclaimed by the oracle at Delphi to be the wisest person in the world.
Okay.
And he didn't believe it. He was like, this is not like no way am I the wisest person in the world. So he spent the rest of his life trying to find someone wiser than him.
Quite a wise thing to do.
And he was like, I don't know anything. Like, I'm not wise. And so he would go and talk to people, experts and respected people, and be like, what is justice? What is fairness? What is right? What is wrong? And he would just be like, I don't know anything. I'm just going to ask you. And he would just look for contradictions and look for things that didn't make sense. And he would just realize that most people, they acted in a confident way, but they couldn't substantiate most of what they were saying. They was just full of contradictions. And
it's almost like either they or their ideas didn't stand up to like the slightest bit of scrutiny.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, and so that concept is really useful. Just the recognition that we need to be careful with the things that we think and the beliefs that we have, and not to be so confident all of the time. And this is linked to science as well, right? Like,
Yes.
Let's put it under scrutiny. Like, let's not be overconfident. And yeah, it's just, I don't know about you, but if I see someone who's like overly fixated on being right, it's a bit of a turn off for me. I'm just like, really? You know, like, there's no wiggle room there. There's no acknowledgement that you could be wrong.
Yeah, because, you know, at that point, they're not actually like concerned with what is right.
Yeah.
They're concerned with being right. I think that's a...
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a... Yeah. So, you know, with you're dealing, as you said, with somebody that doesn't actually care about the truth of the situation or whatever. They just care for whatever reason about not being shown to be wrong in some ways, whether that's an ego problem, whatever it may be. Oh, that was raining out there then.
Yeah. So, yes, right now.
Oh, it is raining?
Yeah.
Oh, there we are.
So the Socratic method, when you first learn about it, like, the point isn't to go, because a lot of it was dramatized by Plato, right? Because like he wasn't like live recording it. He kind of wrote about it after the fact. Socrates didn't write anything down. It's not, the point isn't to inquire into other people's beliefs. The point is to use the Socratic method on your own beliefs. So it's like, if you're just going to annoy people, if you just try questioning them and narrowing it down, instead sit with yourself and be like, what do I think about this? Are there any exceptions? And there's something called the 2-column method that was mentioned by Socrates. And so what he would do, he would do 2 columns on a piece of paper, and he would say something like, George, give me an example of what it means to be a good friend. So you can just give me an example of that.
You know, you're kind, you're caring, you're there for them, you're reliable, you know.
Just give me one for this.
You're empathetic.
Empathetic. Okay, cool. Right. So Socrates will go, okay, cool. Good definition. Being empathetic is like a mark of being a good friend. Now, are there any times when being empathetic would be being a bad friend?
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
Right. So then we need to go back and come up with a better definition, right? And so he would just go and always look for these exceptions.
Yes.
And be like, well, it's not as simple. I need to be more refined. Just being empathetic. I know that is just kind of a quick answer, but that illustrates the point.
But that's, again, subjecting your own ideas to stress test. And I think that's what we echoed that just a little bit earlier, where we said, about that compassion. What did the Buddhists call it? Idiot compassion.
Yeah.
You know, where it can either go too far, or in certain circumstances, that's actually not so good. So I think there's always like a sort of balance between what's good is bad, and it can change depending on the situation, or depending on what sort of circumstances you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I suppose then we talked about the key principles of Stoicism. I thought that was like a really nice sort of introduction to it. Would you say there's like one particular philosopher, one particular individual? Doesn't have to be a philosopher, can be anybody you've had correspondence with on your podcast or anything like that. Has had a particular impact on you in some way, either life outlook or what they've taught you, what you've read maybe? Or is it just so many to count even?
Yeah, there's definitely there's a few. Definitely a few.
So your Mount Rushmore of positive influential individuals. Your Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, I mean, one person that I do think has been really influential. This may be a surprising answer. Is the psychological illusionist Darren Brown.
Okay.
And
I'm glad you said that. Actually, I was going to bring it back around to that magic thing, because you took me off guard with that one. I didn't know that. So I'd be interested to hear about some of your experiences with that. That's something we actually have in common.
Yeah. So Darren Brown, even though he's a magician, he also kind of feels like it's a bit pathetic being a magician. Like, he acknowledges that the reason he started doing magic is because he was insecure and wanted to seem like he had powers and get validation from people.
I think Dynamo's the same. Are you familiar with the magician Dynamo? He was very popular about 10 years ago, or about 8 years ago.
Yeah. And so even like learning hypnosis was a way for him to kind of like hypnotize the big rugby guys and feel like he had something, over that way. Not in like a nasty way, but just probably because he felt lacking.
Yeah.
So he's evolved, and then Darren's work became more about like disproving charlatans and like mediums, and more like psychological. Like, let's take interesting psychological experiments and see if we can apply them in real life. Like, can we use Pavlovian conditioning to make someone do a heist? That's his show, The Heist. But Darren was influential to me because he's such a skeptic. Like, he's a lover of Richard Dawkins, and like he's an outspoken atheist. And just from his reading lists, there's a lot of book on irrational thinking, cognitive bias, and he keeps banging the drum on like how we have blind. And I started reading the recommended reading lists, like on Irrationality by Stuart Sutherland, Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely, Blind Spots was another book. There's just a bunch, The Skeptic's Dictionary, and I started reading essentially books on how dumb I was, right? Which is one of the best things you can do to be less dumb. Just to realize you just don't know everything. You're driven by emotion most of the time.
Absolutely.
I'd recommend like every human needs to study bias at some point, and not just a Wikipedia list of definitions, but actually go into it and try and learn about it.
Okay.
Have you looked into that much?
Not too much, no. Yeah. Not too much.
But you're obviously aware of everything.
Only the bias section of a statistical paper or meta-analysis or whatever. That's about as far as mine goes.
It's obviously part of, your field though, right? Yeah. Like how we can fool ourselves. And,
massively. Massively.
Twist the evidence.
It's the reason why when you're reading a meta-analysis in particular, they do a proper bias assessment to see, how this would affect their results based on how much risk of bias there is, whether it's researcher bias or whatever other form of bias it may be. So yeah, it's very, very important. People learn about it, the various different types and whatnot. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So
especially their own as well, their own preconceived biases as well.
Well, one thing as well is tricky about bias as well is just because you've learned about it, you can never actually get rid of it. So even if you were the world's greatest expert on bias, you'd still be biased. And there's actually a bias that says something like, you're biased because you know about biases that you don't get biased, right? It's like some kind of weird paradoxical.
They're starting to go down some inception routes now.
Right. But you don't want to be overconfident about knowing how dumb you are either, right?
Absolutely.
But Darren also wrote a book called Happy, and the subtitle is Why More or Less Everything is Fine, which I think is quite funny. And it features Stoicism quite heavily in the book as well. So that was like a nice kind of full circle. So yeah, intellectually, there's been kind of like an overlap there. I don't think I would have been as motivated to look into the sort of skeptics world and all that kind of thing if it wasn't for like Darren's input. So I think that's been really useful to me to have that lens of like, is there evidence? Am I fooling myself? Is there like a co-founding variable here? Yeah, that's been really useful to kind of help me think about things deeply and not just to accept things on the surface, right? There could be another reason that's explaining something else.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Even with something like hypnosis, which Darren does on stage shows, he himself doesn't quite believe that there is such a thing as hypnosis, even though he's doing it. Which is kind of funny because like an example would be most of the things that people do under hypnosis, they can actually do when they're not under hypnosis. So when people eat an onion?
Yep.
It's like, if I said to you, right, George, you've got to play a character in a film. You're going to be paid for this now. You've just got to eat this onion like it's an apple. You wouldn't want to do it, but I bet you could. Right? And so hypnosis...
Might have tears streaming down my face, but...
Right. Yeah, but it's sort of like a play along kind of thing, you're kind of getting into a role, like I'm playing along as the hypnosis kind of person on the stage. There's obviously you could argue that maybe there is a state that we haven't discovered, but it's certainly like changed my thinking on it, right? Because if you were to speak to someone on the street, they'd be like, what's hypnosis? It's like a magical state that people go into and you can make them do anything you like. Not quite.
Not quite.
Yeah, not quite.
Oh, fair play. Interesting. That's really, really interesting. In particular, when you're in the magic phase, is there a particular technique or something like, like there's often a sequence of sleight of hands that are involved in making a trick work, for example. Yeah. Is there any ones that you particular, from what you can remember, is there a trick that you can remember having a particular reaction that you liked on the person that you were doing it to? Or were they just, all sort of felt good? Or was there like one sort of trick or one sort of technique you pulled off and you thought, that was really good, and it got a nice little reaction that you can remember?
Yeah. I was never really into like stage magic, you know,
right,
the
okay.
big performance and all that kind of stuff. I liked more like street close-up, sleight of hand stuff. And I think the thing that drew me to it as well, and this is a theme throughout my life, is like learning techniques. There's something I just find enjoyable about that. So like learning certain motor patterns with cards, and certain ways of shuffling and twisting cards, and you know, learning how to lift up two cards and making it look like one card, and then, you know, all of those types of things.
Coupling the cards and, you know, making the cards jump out of the deck and whatnot.
Yeah. So I enjoy the kind of technical mastery of it.
Different ways of doing cuts as well.
Yeah.
Like it's a hell of a skill to learn, and teaches you a lot. It's quite surprising. I know it looks flashy and looks fancy when people do it really professionally, but it's good as well. And I know some of the ones, I don't know if you've ever seen, it was like a sort of comedy magician. I can't remember his name. I think it's James. I know his name. His name is James. But he done a trick called 673 King Street. I've never seen him do it, but it's like he's telling a story as he's doing the trick going along. I've always thought that, like, you know, like magic can be like an amazing like storytelling device as well. I think that's really, really cool as well. But showing how it's not just like the physical, it's a very good mental skill as well. And, you know, I do wonder if it has any like actual practical applications. Like, you know, when you see like in like elderly populations where, you know, if they do something that stimulates their brain, it might help them stave off certain, you know, mental conditions or Alzheimer's and dementia and all stuff like that. I wonder if there's potentially a physical and mental component to do with magic that could help them out as well. Never know.
Doing it or being a spectator?
Yeah. You know, I don't know. Obviously, like physical constraints as they get older, obviously. It's just something that just came to mind now as we were talking about it there. It's just something that came to mind.
Also, there are like books that combine psychology and magic, because one thing magicians are usually masters of is misdirection. And it's like, if you would think like, get me 10 masters of misdirection, you'd be like, where the hell do I go? Oh, magicians.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
It's just there, right? To be able to make your attention go a certain way on purpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's also kind of cool.
Yes, absolutely. I think the only last thing that we were sort of gonna go into a little bit about your BJJ experiences. So, because I think BJJ is one of the things that's changed my life. Definitely for the positive, both in terms of just general confidence, but obviously it's amazing physical activity as well. But there's just so much of a learning curve and depth to it that I don't think people realize. Let's obviously talk about some of your BJJ experiences, but also, do you think that that's had a lot of crossover into the rest of your life and had positive impacts on the rest of your life as a whole as well?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, 100%. So back, remember I told you I created the 30 challenges to enlightenment poster?
Yes.
So that was pretty successful. I think like the first paycheck I had for it was like 10 grand, which was just, at the time, was just like, oh my God, this is super cool. I moved to Prague, living in an awesome city. Life just was good, right? Like I was like living this life that I was like a life of a digital nomad, like traveling, working from a laptop, working on cool projects that were meaningful.
Digital nomad, I like that.
It was just crazy, you know, like just getting up and walking into Prague city, and that was just like normal, right? Like a normal day. Whereas a couple of years earlier, I was just like stuck in a small, like little local area in Wales, right? So it was kind of a cool identity shift. But I like the phrase, there are two ways to suffer. The first way is to not get what you want. And the second way is to get what you want. Because what we need to be happy often is like a goal. Like it's like dopaminergic, like the seeking chemical, neurochemical. When we're going after something and we're chasing something, we feel good, we feel happier. When we've achieved something and we feel like we've done something, we've reached like the top of a mountain, you can sometimes feel a bit empty. And so, yeah, cool. Like I was living in a city, I had like everything that I thought I wanted, but it was a bit like, like a bit empty, a bit meaningless. Like I missed home, I think, and family, and I didn't have that like driving purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And things like anxiety crept up. And yeah, just like, I think when you don't have a strong purpose in life, your mind will create problems for you. One of the things that got rid of like 99% of any anxiety that I've ever had is having a kid. Like since I've had Oliver, like I just don't really struggle.
I think it's a nice quote from Matthew McConaughey as well when I was listening to his book Green Lights. I think he said, when we're up to nothing, no good is usually next. That's a nice little quote.
There you go.
Well.
Yeah, that's it.
But yeah, you were saying.
Yeah, it's not like it's a bit of a strange advice, like, get a kid to help you with your, mental health. But
hey guys, there's like a bunch of kids out there. Just go steal them. Just go steal them. Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend that to everyone, right? Like, obviously, you would want to be ready.
Yeah.
Kind of. Sometimes you rise to the occasion as well.
I was going to say
the case, but
it's like, half and half. Sometimes you need to assess and see like, oh no, there's some things I need to put in place first.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to do it to force yourself to put the things in place.
Yeah. So, but going back to when I was in Prague, it was kind of like I was in this kind of limbo state. I felt like I didn't really have much purpose. So I came back home, and I remember thinking to myself, like, I was also afraid of confrontation a lot as well. Like, knives were allowed in Prague, and like you'd see like sort of like homeless people walking around with big blades in their pocket and on nights out and stuff.
Very off-putting.
Yeah, it just was like at parts of, even though it was very safe actually, there was just, I didn't speak the language, felt like a bit like an outsider. You're walking through like graffitied kind of areas late at night and everyone's speaking a different language. It can make you feel a bit on edge, right? And yeah, I just was afraid of confrontation and like the idea of getting to a physical fight. I was kind of a bit avoidant. And I knew like that I wanted to lean into that, like with the model of anxiety. You can't move away from it. You got to lean into it. So when I came,
it'll only get worse.
When I came back home, I opened up like a document and I was thinking to myself, what are some really cool goals that I could create, like a hero's journey for myself? And at this point, I did not know anything about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Nothing. I didn't know what a closed guard was. I didn't know what a kimono was. I didn't know anything. I might have heard it a little bit from like Jocko and Joe Rogan on podcasts. But when you don't know anything about it, it kind of falls on deaf ears a little bit, It's sort of like, oh, it's just that like thing, like that, like they grab each other. Like you don't really hear it properly. But I wrote down one of my goals should be to become a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I just like wrote it down, which felt ridiculous to me at the time. The only reason I wrote it down is I knew that it would take like 10 to 15 years. If it took like 6 months, I probably wouldn't have wrote it down because I wanted something that was like,
it's like the epitome of like long-term goal, isn't it?
Long-term goal. Yeah. It's meant to be hard. It's going to change who you are.
It's a journey.
It's a journey. Yeah. I was just thinking, wouldn't that be crazy? Like just to be a black belt in jiu-jitsu? That's insane. Like that feels impossible. Yeah. And then I went back to Prague and I went to some sort of event and I bumped into a guy. We were chatting. Hector, his name was. He was from Panama, but he was living in Prague at the time. We got along well. We talked about the Joe Rogan podcast and psychedelics and different things. And then when I went back home, because I added him on Facebook, I looked on his Facebook and he was in these pictures that looked like a jiu-jitsu academy and he's wearing a blue belt. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like he trains this thing called jiu-jitsu. Yeah. So I messaged him. I was like, oh, I can see that you train this jiu-jitsu thing. Like, where do you train? Where's it based?
That's the epitome of when people don't know about it as well. They call it this jiu-jitsu thing.
This thing, yeah. Yeah, like, I don't think
that's how I first referred to it, I think.
Yeah, I may be exaggerating a little bit because obviously... But I messaged him and he was like, yeah, come along. I was like, yeah, I'll be there. And then I didn't go for 3 months. It's like, I wanted to, but it's like, oh, tomorrow or next week. And right, because like I didn't even know what I needed to buy. I think it was like purely a gi place as well. I didn't really do no gi. So I was like, I'm in Prague. Like, where do I get these outfits from? Where do I get this belt from? And what do I like? Blah blah blah. Like, do I need flip flops or like to get all this stuff just to go to the first session?
I still remember mine. Still remember my first session.
And I remember I was actually listening to a Stoicism book on my way to my first jiu-jitsu session on the tram because it was pretty scary, pretty terrifying. You know, I don't know anyone. I'm not going in there with like friends. Hector's in there, but I don't really know him that well.
Yeah, it's a couple thousand miles away from home.
Yeah. I just put it in my calendar, like, to go on this day. So I went. I remember getting there, and the person who ran the school, it was called Jungle Jiu-Jitsu, his name was Nando. And he was from Rio de Janeiro, and he was like this tank of a black belt. Spoke with the Brazilian accent and stuff. And I think he was like a black belt since he was in his early 20s. So he'd been like a black belt for like 20 years or something. And he was still quite young.
So he was in about his 40s at this point,
yeah,
is he? Right,
but
okay.
Like fit and strong and still competed and stuff.
Damn.
And I just remember walking in with this mindset of like, I'm just going to show up, like, whatever, let's see how it goes. And about 70% of the room was like Russian, because there's a lot of Russians in Prague. And they're just like, everyone's like got a shaved head, tattoos, jacked. Everyone's like scary. And I was just like, where am I right now? This is really, this is pretty intense, because when you see people that look really tough and they're wearing a gi, like you can't, if you saw like some kind of, sometimes when people put on a kimono, it seems like a bit fake, you know what I mean? Like they're not really engaging in combat.
Oh yeah, because I remember I took a photo of me when I had my first gi with the white belt on. I took a photo, and I was, you know, like a kid stood there for like the first photo they get taken outside the primary school of them.
Yeah.
But like mom's taking a photo, smile my little cherub as he's going in. I'm stood there like this. I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
What am I doing?
Yeah. So
I still got that photo somewhere. See if I can flash it up now.
Flash it up. Yeah. So, but it's different when you see people with like their gis are like half ripped and their belts look old, they got taped fingers. It just seems like this is not that kind of dressing up.
The belts are worn. You can tell they've been ripped, and there's sweat they've been worn down by sweat.
And there's like a heightened tension in the room as people are kind of, warming up, because it's a big city. So people are probably coming in and out as well. It's not like our gym, where it's a bit more of a community. And I just drilled. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was like, this is it now. This is what I've got to do. And I think I sparred after 3 sessions, and the teacher would like tell you who you would go with. Like, you go with him, you go with him. And sometimes he'd be like, right, you go with him, get smashed.
Oh.
And I joke about it.
And that's something you could joke about now.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something you wanted to joke about at the time.
No. And the rounds were 8 minutes as well. That was fun.
Damn.
All the rounds were 8 minutes, because I think he was like competition rounds. So it was pretty brutal. It was pretty competitive as well. But also like really good. I really loved it. I was like, this is something that I've got to do. At first, you're just running on pure instinct. And I remember going with this blue belt when I first started. And after the round, he said, "Oh, you're pretty good." And I was like, it's my second time sparring. But I wasn't good. I was just doing like anti-jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? I was just like holding on for dear life while he was trying to practice his move. You know what I mean? Like, so I was like, I thought I was doing good at the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see that with new people. They maybe start and they seem tough, and then they start trying to actually do jiu-jitsu, and they go back down again, because now they're opening themselves up to attacks.
Yeah, because I think that's like really common that people will do, especially if like you manage to get, like, say you get top mount on somebody who's brand new. Typically the first thing they do is to grab you around the back and pull you in.
Right.
They'll pull you in close, and I'm like, well, this is just a bit annoying. I can't go back and get an underhook. I'm like, oh, what the hell am I going to do? But then, because that's just them operating on pure instinct. You know what I mean? They just keeping it up in the air the whole time. They haven't been shown how to bridge properly. That's just what I was going through with some of the guys who, hadn't been shown how to bridge properly in Monday night session. But yeah, it's only when they start trying to do the techniques then and stop relying on instinct that they get caught in things, or they get, they might leave their arm out, that you take an underhook or whatever. And then some of them, they'll be like, oh, okay, well, I just need to practice a bit more. And some of them, it's quite sad, they'll like think, oh no, I was doing better before. I'll go back to the way I was doing it before, and then that'll stunt their progress then. Yeah. But I've seen a lot of people in the gym are progressing quite fast. Yeah. I've seemed to find, which is good to see.
Oh yeah. Good to see. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. So I trained for about 3 months then, and I bought some mats for the house. Me and Hector would drill, and we looked at some old like Gracie instructionals, and if you remember that story of like when I read that book in scriptwriting class, I realized I could just through this process of learning and reading, I'd have an advantage. I think with something like jiu-jitsu, it's always fun to look at like, what is your strength? What is your superpower? And then lean more into that. And so did I have the highest VO2 max of the group? No. Could I bench press the most in the group? No, I couldn't. So like, what is it that am I the most competitive, the most aggressive? No. So what is it that I can do that is unique to me, that is better than anyone else? I think I can handle the frustration of meticulous study, and I have the patience to go deeper than most people are willing to go with technical knowledge,
with the studying,
because most people don't want to do the mental work. They just want to train hard.
Yeah.
And I realized as well the kind of progress curve when it comes to exercising. It caps quite early, right? So like if you went fully into improving your physicality, you started trying to get as strong as you could, as fit as you could, you'd make gains, but at a certain point there'd be diminishing returns. You'd have to increase the hours that you're spending in like zone 2 to keep getting your VO2 max higher.
Yes.
But knowledge,
you'd have to start incorporating some other methods, whether it be like HIIT training or, you know, what do they call them? You know, certain types of intervals or fartlek training, incorporating other things. But yeah, you are right.
Yeah, you'd start to hit the plateau.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
you'd get those beginner
and you've got to
gains.
do something to change it to progress it onwards. Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas knowledge isn't quite like that. Knowledge doesn't work the same way, right? It's like there's no plateau for knowledge if you keep learning. The graph and the curve keeps going up and up. And in fact, it could be exponential, because the more you know, the more you can relate it back to existing ideas. And the faster that you can implement, the faster you can know. Like someone who's brand new to jiu-jitsu might take longer to learn like a guard sweep than someone who's been training 10 years. They might be like, oh yeah, I get it. Right?
Because they already know the basic principles. They already have however many hours of experience. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I started getting into jiu-jitsu just because it was like fear of confrontation, do something hard, put myself in like a physical kind of confrontation kind of situation. But then the reason why I love it now is not for that reason. Similar to people who lift weights, they might start because they want to look good or something, right? But they don't keep training because they want to look good. They keep training because they love making gains or seeing their strength go up week by week. The reason I love jiu-jitsu now is because it's the sort of the best thing I've ever found that demonstrates the difference between the illusion of learning and mastery and relearning. Right? So like when you learn something, like in a book, I could tell you a good quote now and you could go out and you think, oh, I'm wiser now. I've read that quote. But it doesn't work like that. And jiu-jitsu shows you that, because if you learned a technique now, can you hit it against strong resistance? No, not straight away. Usually not. There's like different stages to the learning process. First of all, it's like understanding conceptually. Then it's physical movement, so sort of embodying the skill. Then it's different levels of resistance, all the way through to automaticity. And then when you're fully stressed and exhausted, still being able to perform it. I love that feeling of like, oh, I can learn something and then actually do it against resistance in the gym. It's like, that to me is like the thrill of learning.
Yep. No,
do you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like you might have an like if for those of you familiar with jiu-jitsu, you might have like an elbow escape or a bridging escape or any other form of escape or some form of technique. It might be an attacking technique that you know it might work at white to blue belt level, and you can hit a certain type of arm bar on blue belts quite reliably. But then the minute you go to purple belts or the minute you go to brown belts, it's just not happening. And then you need to go back and figure out why that is, why that level of resistance is all of a sudden completely negating whatever your attack, or you're stuck in the bottom of mount and your elbow escape is not helping you whatsoever. Because typically that's like your number one defense. If you're in like bottom mount, is typically you go for the elbow escape. And then you need to go and figure out why, so that you can still perform it if you need to, all the way up to black belt, ADCC champion level. Because ultimately that's where it needs to be if you want the absolute best of that technique possible. So, and there's a thrill of learning in that. There's a thrill of learning in that, going back and dissecting what you're currently doing, why it's not currently working, and seeing how you correct that and seeing how you progress forward from there.
Yeah.
I think that's an amazing thing. One thing that got me with jiu-jitsu in particular is it's so humbling.
Mm-hmm.
It's so humbling, and it makes you really understand how vulnerable, especially when you're first starting out.
Yeah.
How vulnerable you are. And you mentioned him earlier, Jocko. It was one of the things that Jocko got me into it, was because if you're walking down the street, for example, and you have less than virtuous intentions, could we say, and you try to square off with me, and you put your dukes up, as Jocko said, and he said it in that famous Jocko voice. And well, the only thing is, I could still run away, and you got to catch me. But if you grab me now, if you grab my clothes and you start ragging me around, now I know. Now I got to know what to do.
Yeah.
And that's different, especially if there's, somebody that, you might be walking down the street with Oliver. I might be walking down the street with my girlfriend, for example. And it's like, oh no, I've actually got to know how to handle myself now.
Yeah.
And it's very, very different. As soon as somebody grabs you, or like grabs your clothes and restrains you in a way that you don't know what to do, it's terrifying. Yeah. It's terrifying. And I think that's one of the things why when you're in the gym and you're with people that you trust, it's not so bad. Especially if you're with somebody that you don't know, or is just very good at applying pressure, or you're not in that situation where you're in a gym and it's a controlled environment. It's absolutely terrifying. I don't think a lot of people are prepared for that. And I think, the sooner more people start something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. I spoke about this on a past podcast as well, especially if you work in something like a law enforcement role. And I know Tom DeBlas to talk about this a lot as well, because it changes your mindset going into situations. Yeah. I've always found, like, you have the classic guys. I know we've made jokes about this after training, the guys that just see red, and it's like, yeah, but if you go up against somebody who knows what they're doing, it doesn't matter how much red you see. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think that's what ends up getting people into a lot of bad situations as well, as they go into it with that overly confident, tip of the Dunning-Kruger curve mindset. Whereas Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, when you understand how vulnerable you are, and then you have at least a good foundation of being able to take care of yourself, you go into those situations a lot more confident, but also a lot more humble as well. Which I think, for example, if you're in police, for example, you're dealing with the public, especially in the climate we're in now, that's going to be really, really important for ensuring public trust, and especially things like that where you're in high stress, high danger environments. Yeah, as well. I definitely think it's a superpower. I definitely think more people should do it. And it's amazing for your fitness as well. Mm-hmm. It's amazing for your fitness as well.
In terms of like the confidence side of jiu-jitsu, I similar to you, like getting into street fights and all that kind of thing is like very unappealing in every way. And I think maybe jiu-jitsu even makes street fights less appealing as long as you're thinking straight, right?
Yes.
Because you just never know, right? Mm-hmm. And you just never know what skills someone has, and you could be getting into a bad situation. And also, it's like when you train any kind of combat sport, it's like you leave it on the mat, it's really healthy. I think you don't walk around with this like, ooh, how tough really am I? You know what I mean? It's like you've been humbled, you've done well against some people, you've done bad against some people. It's like, cool, like that's the game I'm playing. I don't need to play that outside.
Yes, exactly.
But also some really good skills that I think jiu-jitsu teaches you that are just useful in life is like the mindset of, I don't need to swing a big haymaker if I'm threatened. Like if there's a home intruder, like I don't need to just swing and hope for the best. It gives you, it changes the tactics around confrontation. So if someone was coming into your house at night and you knew where they were, you could just get behind them. And that's it. There's no like, right, I've got to like time the perfect punch or get like a weapon or, right? It's just like, you could just incapacitate someone in that way. Yeah. Which gives you that confidence.
And it's a lot safer for you and a lot safer for them as well, especially in today's world, for example, where like if you end up in a physical altercation where it's like, especially like people people who train with us, they work on the doors on pubs or in security for events and stuff like that, for example. But if they end up in a situation where they've got to spark someone out, they can get in a lot of trouble, a lot of legal trouble. Whereas if they take somebody down safely, and I know even then, one of the guys we knew had a little bit of, trouble around it, because I think he had to put somebody to sleep with a rear naked choke. They just wasn't cooperating whatsoever. But even then, knowing how to restrain somebody would be a lot safer and a lot better for you, even then from a legal standpoint, than you having to, spark them out, and then you end up potentially with, repercussions later on down the line, even though you were potentially defending your home, defending your kids.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It's definitely great for that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like if you can like just someone's being like untoward, dangerous out, and for whatever reason you're given the duty of trying to restrain this person, you could try and do so in a way that you could demonstrate to people like, I don't have violent intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm trying to actually just de-escalate this.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just like swinging for it, then it's hard to justify that.
Exactly.
Right? It's difficult.
Exactly. It's hard to say that you would de-escalate in a situation with a haymaker.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What advice would you give to people? Because you've had participation in running, co-owning businesses or co-owning ventures, and running the podcast, your own courses, etc. What advice would you give to people that wanted to start something like that? They feel as though they have a certain area of expertise, or they feel that they can apply themselves in some way. They'd like to get their own business off the ground. What sort of advice would you give to them in their starting out?
Yeah, so I do actually work with a couple of people one-on-one as well, where that it's interesting because like some of my clients, I don't really talk about it like openly, but they're very diverse in their backgrounds. So it could be like a tech entrepreneur, millionaire. It could be like someone who's like really high up in like American politics. Could just be someone who, like you said, who just wants to like get started on their blog.
This is where you find out that Jon Brooks is actually an advisor to the Trump campaign.
Not quite.
No. It's not sponsored by Trump and Vance 2024.
If that was true, I wouldn't tell you anyway.
That's the next guest.
Trump. I'll hook you up. Yeah, well, it depends like on the specifics. Can you give me more of a specific kind of situation? Because that makes all the difference, right?
Yeah,
someone wants to start a podcast, or
yeah, somebody who feels they want to apply themselves in like a courses sense. So some of the courses you run, like you've got some on meditation, you've got some on resilience. If they wanted to run, say, a course like that, how would you recommend they sort of go about it? And then we'll talk about a podcast as well.
A live course?
Yes.
So like, okay. So there's two elements to this. The first one is the technical knowledge to be able to actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's I guess it's like the emotional intelligence to be able to do it as well.
Mm.
So like if you're bashed around and ruled by your feelings, you're going to constantly feel stuck. Like you can't do anything. You don't have the frameworks to be able to actually take action on it. Vice versa, if you're very confident and capable, but you don't have any technical know-how, well, how are you actually going to run the course? How are you going to get people to sign up and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the emotional side of things, I'm a big fan of this principle of right action. So in different cultures throughout history, their view of emotions and actions have been different to a lot of the countries we now find in modern day in the West. So a lot of people have this belief that if I don't feel like doing something, I don't have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like fully justified. Like I do what I feel. Right? Do you see that? Like I was going to go out for a run today, but I kind of just like wasn't really feeling it. So I just don't have to do that now, right? Because my feelings told me I don't have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to start like a course, but I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm quite ready. I should do more research. I don't feel like it. So therefore I shouldn't run with it. I much prefer this idea of like, this has been useful for me, of right action. It's like, what is the right thing to do? And don't really let your emotions get too much of a vote. You just take right action anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I spend a lot of my time being scared and being nervous and not wanting to do things. I just do it anyway, right? Because it's like, whatever. The same as like the first jiu-jitsu session. I just put it on my calendar. Did I really want to go? Not really. But I was like, oh, I guess I am. Like, walk to the tram, stand on it, get off it, go to the dojo. Oh, I don't really feel like doing this podcast with this guest. Like, I wish they'd cancel on me. But like, oh, well, just show up, be there on time, see what happens, and just sort of physically put your body in it in like a step-by-step sense. So just embrace the fact that you aren't always going to feel like doing what you need to be doing, and you're going to be afraid. And most people that are good at what they do feel those feelings too. The difference between someone who's successful and unsuccessful is often their tolerance for negative emotion. Like they still feel those feelings, but they can just withstand.
They can deal with them better.
Yeah. They're still horrible, but they can handle it. Similar to like cardio, right? There's a mental toughness component to it. Some people, they can just force themselves to maybe be in the red zone a bit longer. And therefore they may perform a little bit better. It's not all about the raw metrics. There's a psychological.
Yeah, I think that's one thing, particularly with cardio, especially the time. Like if you're just on a treadmill at a regular pace, like 10 minutes, but the gap between, at least for me, between 10 and 15 minutes feels like 10 and 30 minutes, and I'm just like, oh, I just got to keep going, minute by minute, almost minute by minute, just keep going, and you get into a point. Then I think you do get into a point where, as you get towards the end of it, as like the end of your session is coming, it feels as though the minutes are going a lot quicker then. It's like, I think David Goggins calls it the governor. I think he calls it within the brain, not the Walking Dead character. But when you get into like the middle portion of it, it's like, it just feels like it's just so slow and you've got so long to go. Whereas then when you get towards the end, it feels like you're going a lot faster. And I think, I don't know if you would have seen it with some of the people that you work with. Would you say they would be like, most people sort of like tend to, as soon as they get that little bit of friction or that little bit of like slowness in the middle, that's when they tend to drop off?
Yeah. There's, this, right, from your work, like getting people to lose weight is not that hard because they have a big like why. Like they can give you 20 reasons why they want to lose the weight. But then when they've done it, people struggle maintaining that because they now don't have a big why. So like, I don't find weight loss that impressive. I find people who maintain their weight very impressive. If you've lost a lot of weight and you've maintained that, like I really respect that because that's really hard. It's like if you know somebody who's lost a lot of weight and you see them a year from now and they're the same, or they've maybe even taken it even further. They're even better. That's like, I have a lot of respect for that. It's just very. It is hard to get people sometimes out of that trap of yo-yo dieting, because it's a bit like with yo-yo dieting, what we were saying, where every anxiety-induced retreat makes everything you retreat from more anxiety-inducing. If somebody fails a diet because they dieted too quickly and their metabolism adapts, then it's going to make it even harder the next time around, and that can have negative, vast negative consequences for them later on down the line as well. I think James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, has some quote, something like, don't rise to the level of your habits, fall to the level of your system.
Yeah, you don't rise to the level of your habits, you fall to the level of your systems.
Yeah, so you should have systems in place that you can still follow even on your worst day.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
That's the idea. Like even when nothing's going good, you haven't had good sleep, you've got stress. There are systems
I think
in your
like
life.
meal prep is a great example of that. That meal prep system where even if nothing else has gone right, if you've got food prep, then you know that you can eat that food, and it's, tracked out in terms of how many carbs are there, whatever carbs it may be, but you know how much protein's there, it's within your energy budget for that meal, at least you can follow that. And I think that's where a lot of people with their preparedness tend to fall down, because they're not prepared to prepare sometimes as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that's like the emotional side of it, because you asked about great courses.
Yep.
Then there's like the technical
side of it.
One skill that is really important to learn is to be able to sell. And a lot of content creators like have massive aversion to that. They don't want to be asking people for money, and right. How
you asked me before, and then people, I still sometimes get into the frame of mind where sales is a dirty word.
Right. But that just means that you think your products suck. right? Right? Because like, if you were like, this is so much value for what I'm giving you, it would just be like, you wouldn't feel dirty about it, right?
Yeah, I get what you mean. Because I inadvertently just said on camera that my product sucks.
Inadvertently. Right. Yeah, but it's
tear it down.
Like, a good salesperson like really uses whatever they're trying to sell. Like Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, I'm sure he's actually using an iPhone. Like, he's using iPads, he's using MacBooks. He's falling in love with his own products because it's going to be way easier to talk positively about them then, right? You just smiled when I said Apple. I don't know if there's a reason for that. I know you're an Android user, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
That was admittedly because it was secondhand.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so like, you don't want to be a good salesperson. You don't want to, I think where people mix it up is like they associate a person who's trying to convince you to buy something you don't need. That to me is like not good sales. A good salesperson is able to create like really positive win-win dynamics, right? Like no-brainers. Like, make someone, as Alex Hormozi said, make someone an offer that's too good to say no to. It's just like, it's obvious, right? It's like they have a hard time saying no to it if it's good. So if I'm selling you something like a 10-week course on, I don't know, like, let's just say it's a topic like anxiety, because we've been talking about that. And I'm chatting to you and you're like, no, I'm feeling in a really good place, not much anxiety. I would be like, okay, cool. You don't join this. This one's not for you. That's still being a good salesperson. Because like, that it would be bad and shady and out of integrity to try and like make you do something.
Also, out of your niche.
Yeah, out of your niche. Or let's just say you said like, yeah, I want to do this course, but I'm really struggling with money. I'm in debt. I would probably say to you, like, join for free. And then just like at some undisclosed point in the future, do me a favor, whatever you want. I won't even ask for one. Right?
Okay, that's interesting.
Right? Because it's like integrity sales.
Yeah.
You know? And it's just like, it comes from a place of actually wanting to help people. So yeah, like, I've sold a lot over the phone of different like retreats, because we created our own retreat company in High Existence, like thousands of dollars worth of sales, but it never feels like I'm actually selling. It's more just like, this is what we've created. How does this sound to you? Tell me more about you. Is this a good fit? And that's pretty much it. Some people, they don't even want to go there, and they have massive aversion to even mentioning like a price or something. You're going to be pretty, I think, if I look at you, I think that you are a skilled creator. You're knowledgeable. You're obviously able to learn the tech side of things because you've helped coordinate this, you've set this up, you're doing your own podcast, so you can learn all that kind of stuff. Maybe the two biggest weaknesses, if we want to put you in the hot seat right now.
No, carry on.
I'm
okay with this.
I feel like you'd be a bit weird asking for money. Just as my instinct. Depends. And maybe low amounts, I think you'd be okay, like personal training stuff. But like, I don't know if you'd be able to be like, yeah, guys, this is like, $1,000, like,
yeah.
So that's the one thing. And then the other thing as well, I think, is thinking, two things actually, thinking big and realizing that you're capable of way more. Like, you're able to play a much bigger game than you're playing. Right? And just sort of like deciding after this call now that you're actually going to reach out to like 5 of your favorite authors. It's like, oh no, I can't do that, right?
Absolutely.
It's like, oh, I need to be at a certain point before I can do that. It's like, I would say like, no.
Yeah, definitely recently there's been a bit of a perspective shift going on, at least in my perspective.
Yeah.
Anyway, like speaking in ways about things that I want to do that I wouldn't have normally spoke about before. Yeah. Like, as you said, thinking a lot bigger and thinking that maybe I can accomplish a lot more. Just realizing that there were things that I wasn't doing before that didn't even cross my mind before.
Yeah.
But now, as you said, having somebody in front of me that showed me it's so easy to send an email, send a message, do whatever. I'm like, what was it? I'm brain dead if I don't do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
there's a book called $100 Million Leads. I think I recommended to you.
Hormozi.
Alex Hormozi. Yeah. So it's like, he just outlines like the starting point would be warm leads. So people that you have in your contact base, right? So like if you wanted to create a course on, say, fitness or training or MMA conditioning or whatever, first step is you've got to create a product that offers a lot of value. Like you've got to really love what you've created to the point that you can genuinely talk about it. Like, guys, if you do this, I promise you, it's going to have massive impact. You're going to have your dream outcome if you do this. If you don't feel that, you need to go back to the drawing board. So you create something that you really believe in.
So that's number one.
Number one. But you could also just create a prototype of it. Like you don't have to necessarily make the whole thing. If it's like a live cohort, you can create the idea of it and the framework, maybe the first week, and then fill in the blank later. Sort of like if I wanted to design my own journal, I might only need to make the first 5 pages of that, show people that could invest in it. And then when they've given me the money, I can fill out the rest, right? You don't have to finish the whole thing first.
Okay.
Prototype, right?
Yeah. I see that, yeah.
Enough to show someone what's included. So you don't need to make every template of everything before someone's even joined. It depends on the type of course. You can drip stuff out over time. And then the next thing you could do, if you have like an existing audience or a brand, you could leverage that through like sending emails and stuff. But if you don't, you could just make a comprehensive list of everyone you know and just message them and like tell them what you've been working on and genuinely see if it's a good fit for them. And maybe even give like massive discounts or give it away for free to the first people to get testimonials. And then based on their experience, you can tinker with the product, you can get reviews of it, and then you kind of go from there. So it doesn't have to be like rocket science. The number one thing you need though is just that kind of like, you've got to be able to take yourself seriously in a way. It's like a paradox because you've got to take yourself seriously and lightly at the same time. Like I'm going to act like this is going to be a success and that this is going to be epic, but I'm not attached to it anyway. It's like, all right, I failed, whatever, you know? Like you're not going to have like be severely depressed if it doesn't work out. But you're acting as if it probably will.
No, I get what you mean. I think a lot of the things sometimes people get into traps, this particularly with me, for example, is they get too hung up thinking about what happens if it doesn't work out. Like, oh, people are going to say this, or I'm going to look this way. Whereas again, having that bit of fortitude, I suppose, or that bit of resilience to just be like, oh, well, it didn't work. Let's try again. Let's try again with something different. Let's modify it or let's go forward that way. Oh yeah, that's amazing.
You can also, if you have fears about like public humiliation and how it's going to look to other people, you can do something called building in the open. So you kind of include other people as part of your content on the journey that you're on. Like, I am nervous about this launch that I'm doing. I have imposter syndrome and fears that it's not going to work out. You share that with people and then share the results. Like, oh, it didn't actually go as well as planned, but I learned this. Right? And then keep working on it. You don't have to like keep it all to yourself.
I think that's something that I've always done in particular, is that if there's something that is I perceive as intimidating or something like that, I tend to shut down and keep it to myself. I wouldn't have thought to have put it more out in the open. Yeah. But obviously then if you put it out in the open, you get more perspectives on it as well. And it's not just, you'll get people that want to help you as well. Because I think quite often it's a reflection of how we see the situation. Like if we put it out in the open and we think that everybody's going to laugh at us, it's a reflection of what we think about it, not what other people are thinking about it. So I think it's about being aware of your own perceptions also. Yeah. And understanding that it's not just about your own perceptions.
It also comes back to, remember we talked about evidence-based like self-improvement? Because I've created courses and guided tracks and podcast episodes, and I've received like literally thousands of reviews, like positive reviews. It's negatives too, but like thousands of positives. It's not hard at all for me to think that I'm good at what I do. It's like, it's easy because there's evidence there. If you're just getting started though, it's going to be hard. So you do maybe have to just get some wins under your belt and maybe even give stuff away for free just to get some reviews in. You know, if you've got 5 people to be like, George, this actually was amazing. I swear I love this. I imagine the next thing you do then, you're going to have a lot more confidence than like, I don't know, is this any good? You know, that kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's where at the minute with the podcast as well, it's definitely been a quest of just keep doing it, no matter what. Like, as you said, building up that stack of evidence and then, you know, because one form of it is obviously how many you've got, and then other things could be like different metrics like reviews, what people have said, etc. But I'm just thinking at the minute, I'm just focusing on, you know, building up that library of content at the minute.
Are you talking about this podcast?
Yes.
Or, yeah. So is this episode 1 or is this?
Well, this is the first interview. This is the first 2-person podcast that I've done, but overall there's about 50 odd episodes.
Are you, so is that
episodes.
the stuff on like cold exposure and all that?
Yeah. All of those as well.
So yeah, like a really good frame to approach the podcast from is like, I'm doing this because I love doing it, because I can meet cool people doing it, because I can improve my own understanding. And I know you do that, right? Because you go into the research before you teach on it. And money is like the last thing ever. If you can get like 10,000 podcast downloads per episode, which isn't that unrealistic, really, when you get going, then money will sort of like take care of itself. That makes sense. But like, yeah, it's just, it needs to be something you love doing and you do for free.
Yeah, and that's where I found is that, especially now I'm into the swing of it a lot more. It's something I'm doing because I love doing it.
Yeah.
It's something I'm doing it, I love doing it. And know eventually, I think it's the old coach, Vince Lombardi said, you know, just essentially do what you got to do what you keep going, focus on your game, the scoreboard will take care of itself. So that's what, and I found it's been a lot more fulfilling that way as well. Just, there's something I feel people are going to find valuable. You know, just get it out there, just keep getting it out there. And then, as I said, not being blasé about it, but keep doing the work and let the scoreboard take care of itself.
Yeah. Okay. That's the way to do it.
So where can people find you? Where can people find you? Not physically. Not physically. I'm not expecting you to dox yourself on this podcast, but if people wanted to go and find, if people wanted to go and find, you know, either, you know, the courses or the products you have. Obviously, we mentioned the podcast at the start of this episode. You have your own, I believe it's called the Stoic Handbook by Jon Brooks. So obviously you can go and listen to that, guys. There's some amazing content on there. But have you got any social medias or websites or anything that people can find you on if they are interested?
Yeah, I don't really use social media at the moment, just because you can't do it all. And I haven't needed to. Like, my perspective is like essentialism, try to focus on the essential few. And then when I get those under control, I can branch out. I guess maybe if someone's just more interested in Stoicism and just wants to keep learning about it, the podcast would be the best place to look for that. The website's stoichandbook.co. If you just go there, you just find most things you want.
There you are, guys. You find the links down below in the show notes anyway, guys. You'll find the links down below to check out some of Jon's stuff. It is really good. Really, really good stuff. A lot of, I think I listened to one of your episodes before, fairly recently, because I remember I sent you a screenshot of the cover of it and be like, this is exactly what I needed today. I can't remember what it was. It was some sort of
wealth one. It was.
Yeah. And I think it was like a sort of like podcast meditation exercise mix, which I thought was quite nice. So you get a lot of that over on the Stoic Handbook podcast, guys. But yeah, Jon, it's been a pleasure.
Good conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Woo! All right.